CameraConnections is all about what plugs in, hooks up, and connects to the camera. So we're going to be looking at all the accessory devices that we're going to plug in and any things that you need to know about that system. All right, we're going to start with the power system. So on the bottom, we have our power compartment, which has a removable battery door if you need to remove it for adding the vertical grip. The battery release will enable the battery to come out so it doesn't automatically drop out on you. Now, these new batteries have a little holographic label on it. I can show you that real quickly if I can find the door to my camera here. And so you can see right here, there's a little holographic label on the battery. Now, these new batteries still work with the old chargers, and the old batteries work in this new camera, but this little indicator on it, it's the LP-E6NH battery. This is something that can be charged via a USB connection to the camera. So if you do want to do USB charging with the camera, you will need to have the new batteries. They are also a little bit more powerful than batteries in the past. And as I say, the previous E6 and E6N versions will work in here. They're not as strong, and remember, for those of you who were interested in getting 12 frames per second about having a full battery charge, that's probably going to be able to be easier to do with these new NH batteries, which are, of course, a little bit more money. Now, it does come with the standard old LC-E6 charger, and it's a great fine battery charger that will work with all three of the batteries that we have talked about that have been part of this 5D and now R5 system. There is a little door in the side of the camera so that you can hook up an AC adapter. So if you need to power the camera consistently over a long period of time, you're in a studio or a scientific environment, you would get the DR-E6 and the AC-E6NH, and it's going to sell for about $150, and that allows you to have the camera powered and you don't have to worry about batteries running out and replacing batteries if you're in an environment that is conducive to that type of work. There is a battery grip terminal here that will hook up to the Canon BG-R10, which is great if you are shooting verticals a lot. And so if you do portrait photography, if you do sports photography, which is people pictures, just in a different way, you end up having the camera vertical a lot of the time. And this just makes the camera more comfortable to hold, makes it steadier because your grip is better, and it gives you controls in an area that are very convenient to work with when you're working in that vertical area. It also allows you to shoot with two batteries in the camera, which means you're less likely to need new batteries. And once again, for those of you who want that 12 frames per second, you're probably going to be able to do that for a much longer period of time without having to replace the batteries. Now, there is the PDE1 USB charger device, and this is going to allow you to charge the batteries in the camera. And so if you do want to do that, you can get this device. Now, this device, in my opinion, it's about $140, is a tad on the expensive side for charging through a USB port. And I have used the charger that came with a Fuji camera, and it works perfectly fine. And so if you are wanting to charge through the USB port on this camera, not everything will work. And we'll talk more about that when we get over to the port side on the camera. Now, in the vertical grip, there is actually two vertical grips that you can get. There is the WFT R10A wireless file transmitter. So the camera has Wi-Fi built in, and it's only so good because it's in a relatively small device. And so by adding that device into the battery grip on the bottom of the camera, they have a larger area to work with and can have a more powerful signal. So if you are doing a wireless transfer on a regular basis, let's say you're working in a studio and you have clients looking at images on a computer screen that you have images wirelessly sent over to, it can get a little bit slow with just the in-camera system. So if you want a more beefed up system, there is this grip. It is a bit on the expensive side. It's $1,000 just for the grip, but it will allow you much greater capabilities in that regard and will be worth it for some of you out there. All right, also on the bottom, we have our tripod socket. Yippee! It's exactly in line with the lens as it should be, 1/4 so it fits all standard tripods and monopod accessories. As far as the memory cards on the side of the camera, so pop the door open, we have memory card slot 1, which is for our CF Express Type B memory card, which is a somewhat new card here in the photography world. And then we have our favorite SD cards, which have been around for quite some time and are extremely popular and very affordable in price. Let's talk about these two cards. First off, we'll talk about the old one. The secure digital memory card, pretty easy to work with. It's got a lock switch on the side. When it's in the downward position, that will lock images from getting deleted or recorded to the card. We have the size of the card. There's different naming conventions for that. We have the bus speed, which tells you whether it has 1 or 2 lines of communication with the camera. But the important setting for a lot of people is the speed class, especially if you are shooting video. This is going to determine how and what type of video you can shoot. And as I said before, and worth saying again, there are lots of limitations when shooting with this camera and only an SD card. You are going to be limited in the resolution, the frame rates, the file sizes that you can record on this camera. And so if you were using this camera to record movies, you want to get a CF Express card. It can be done on an SD card in some situations, but as I say, there are lots of limitations. All right, this new CF Express Type B card. And I say that Type B because there are 3 different form factors. There's A, B, and C. There's not a lot of use of A and C at this point in time right now. B is the most common one out there, but it's still a pretty new one. It does come at a premium for the same size of card in memory as the SD cards, but it is a much faster card. It is much better built. It does not feel nearly as flimsy, and it's only a little bit bigger than the SD card. So as far as a form factor, I'm a big fan of this card. I think it could be the best one out there. Now, it's exactly the same size, shape, and connections as the XQD card, but it is not necessarily compatible with an XQD card. So if you have an XQD card, it is not going to work in this camera. However, this CF Express card may work in a camera that uses the XQD card if they have set up the protocol for it to work with 2 different systems. And so just be aware, don't get XQD cards. They look right, they don't work in here, they don't have the right compatibility with it. And so the reason that they've gone to this new system is so that we can get 4K video, so that we can get 8K video, so that we can shoot at 60 frames a second with 4K. And so it allows us a lot more capability. It can also handle much larger file sizes. And so, as I said before, this camera can get rather warm when shooting certain types of video, and the memory cards themselves can actually get very hot. And so there are warnings about touching the memory card if you've been recording a lot of high speed and high resolution video on the camera. Over on the top of the camera, we have our good old standard hot shoe, and leads to our collection of Canon speed lights. So there's a number of different speed lights you can get. The 470 is probably a good one if you want kind of a minimum light to go with this camera that has a bit of flash. The 600EX was their top of the line for quite some time. They've now introduced the EL1 with a price that goes way over the top. It does have a more powerful radio triggering, and if you are looking to hook up with multiple strobes in a very compact size, it does provide a nice travel option. There are other flashes that you can get that are more powerful for much less money, much better in the studio. But for certain travel type scenarios, especially ones where you want to be hooked up and be able to control things automatically through the camera, the EL1 is maybe the best flash that's ever been in that market of flash, a portable TTL style flash. If you are using one of these external units, be aware that the OCE3 is a handy little cord for getting the flash off the camera. That's one of your first rules of better flash lighting, is removing it off the camera, moving it a little bit, putting it on a bracket, getting it away when you are shooting macro photography. And as we talked about when we were talking about the different shutters on the camera, the mechanical top shutter speed with flash is 1/200th of a second. When you're using electronic first shutter curtain, it is 1/250th of a second. All right, over on the left-hand side of the camera, we have our main ports. First up is a screw-in connector for a cable protector. There's a little plastic device, and if you're hooking the camera up to an HDMI recorder or monitor or something of that nature, that cable can pop out very easily because the type of HDMI connector in this camera is not the best for a video feed. And so you can lock it in using this cable protector device. The USB connection is going to be very valuable for a lot of reasons, for downloading information. You can also charge. You can use that overpriced PDE-1. You can plug in other types of cords for charging, but not everything is going to work. If you just plug in a cord from your laptop using an old style USB on one side and a new USB-C on the other, it's not going to have any effect. It's not going to charge the battery. It's not going to power the camera. And so just be aware that you can charge. You need to have the right type of cable and power source from it. You also need to have that new NH version of the battery in the camera for that to work. So a lot of things need to be aligned correctly for you to get charging through here. But you could also download as well. If you want to send the video signal out, that's going to go out through the HDMI output. It's a smaller Type D style. Not the best for connections. It tends to wiggle loose, which is why you want the cable protector in many cases. All right, in the next door, we've got a bunch of connections in here. First up is the microphone jack. So if you do want to hook up an external microphone, Canon makes their own, but you're welcome to put on any of the other brands that fits in with the standard size jack. If you want to monitor sound and get sound correctly, you got your standard headphone jack here. If you are working with older studio strobes that do not have a wireless connection, you can hook up an old style PC sync. And when I say PC, it has nothing to do with personal computer. It has to do with the way the flash is synchronized. That's the name of the flash unit. And so it's kind of an old school system that has been on professional cameras for decades at this point. Looking to the front of the camera, we have our remote terminal Type N3, which means it works up with the different N3 remotes from Canon. If you just need to trigger the shutter release, the TC80 N3 will do the job. That's about $50. The fancier RS80 N3 has a lot more features to it, but those features were a lot more valuable in the years gone by when the cameras did not have the intervalometer or long timer into it. But it does have a few extra features that you might find useful, but it's something that has been used on all of the Canon 5D series of cameras, so it's something that a lot of us photographers might have in that drawer of accessories. All right, when it comes to the lens mount, we have our standard lens release button on there. It's got a lens locking pin, which you'll hear kind of snap and click into the lens. So be aware of when you're mounting your lenses, you hear that little click. We have our contacts, a few more of them here on the bottom of the lens mount, along with the lens for communicating aperture focus information. And we have the red line for the lens mount. And so if anyone who is new to photography, changing lenses is something you're going to do all the time. It's something you want to get very comfortable with. And so pressing down on the lens release lever, turn it, just a little bit of a turn. You'll see the red indicator on the lens. You'll see the red indicator on the body where you want to align things. Good chance to take a look at some of the other things. You'll notice the shutter comes down to block the sensor off. You'll notice that the lens release has this little spring-loaded pin right next to it, and that's what's connecting up with this little hole on the lens. You'll also notice that many of the lenses have rubber seals here so that it protects for rain and water in there. Line up your red lines, give it and listen for the click. There we go. That means we're properly connected and you're ready to go. So get very comfortable changing lenses, because that's one of the best parts about owning an interchangeable lens camera. So that takes you through a few of the camera connections, and hopefully now you've seen some accessories that might serve a purpose and help you out in the future.